Welcome, fellow humans. This is See You Next Time. I enjoy long walks by the beach, quiet nights in, and defragmenting and updating my operating system. No, wait, not that. Human things, like defecating. Today, we're looking at some entitled parents, where we're going to witness how selfless an entitled mother can be. But that's later. For now,
let's just jump into it.
This one's from Few Recover 6732. Entitled woman demands I move on an empty bus. So this was 3 years ago, and I was 7 or 8 months pregnant at the time. I had 2 doctor's appointments at 2 separate hospitals due to my high-risk pregnancy, as it's called in the UK. And I couldn't drive, so I had to do a lot of bus travel that day. All my family were working, and my partner was working to save for his paternity leave. He's self-employed, so no paid paternity leave. At about 8 months pregnant, my feet were swollen. I was huge. I ate and just wanted this all to go smoothly for me. Oh, and it was also July, so it was hot for me. I'd had my first hospital appointment and was on the bus to go to the second. I had sat in the designated baby, mother and elderly seats on the bus as I'm hugely pregnant. But I sit with my bag on my lap because the area I live in has a lot of elderly people who travel on the bus routes, so I didn't want to make anyone feel like they couldn't sit next to me if they needed the seat. I should also state, on a bus with 35 seats, there were only 4 passengers, including myself. There were plenty of seats for whoever got on the bus. The bus stop after I got on, a mother and her daughter got on the bus. Mother paid for her ticket, turned, looked straight at me. The bus driver pulled away here. Walked up to me and asked me to move. I said no, I need to stay seated. She started to get loud and looked at the other passengers, saying, "These seats at the front are for elderly, pregnant, and people with families. I need to sit here with my daughter." I said, "I am pregnant. I will not be getting up to walk while the bus is moving. Also, as I'm pregnant, this seat is for me, isn't it?" The daughter said, "Mummy, there's loads of seats. Let's sit at the back." The mother replied with, "No, this girl," I was 27 at the time, "needs to learn respect and needs to move. She doesn't need this seat, and lying about being pregnant is not going to make me stop. Move!" So I moved my bag on the seat next to me, braced myself on the poles, and stood up, revealing my huge baby bump, and said, "I'm not moving one step. Now leave me alone." I should add that I was massive. I gave birth 3 weeks early, and my daughter was already larger than newborn onesies when she was born, so I was probably looking 9 months pregnant at this point. All the colour drained from the entitled mother's face as an older man at the back burst out laughing and started clapping. I turned to look and saw him applauding me. I just gave a small smile and then turned to sit back down. But I couldn't help notice but the entitled mother had walked up to the bus driver and was saying something I couldn't hear over the engine sounds. Eventually the entitled mother shouted, "Just stop the effing bus!" Which he did, and they got off, completely in between 2 bus stops on a busy national speed limit road, and between 2 towns, so nothing around, no shops or houses. It was actually a road that went through the middle of the forest nearby. My sister recommended I post this on here when it originally happened, but I didn't use Reddit back then, so I thought I'd share now. It really does beg a belief that people can be this cretinous, but then, as I've mentioned before on this channel, I've met Gen Pop.
Look at it this way. Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that.
Not only did she get shirty with you for no reason, as there were plenty of seats, she doubled down, suggesting that those priority seats are for her and her 12-year-old daughter, which they are absolutely not, by the way. They're for those with impaired mobility, and at best for parents with babies. She then tripled down by suggesting you were faking pregnancy. It seems you found some kind of glitch in this entitled mother's source code, which triggered a recursive self-reflection error. "I'm always right." "But you're clearly wrong here." "Correct, but I'm always right." But you're wrong here.
Correct. I'm incorrect. Correct. I'm incorrect.
At least this cataclysmic system failure managed to restore enough shame in her to drive her off the bus. Of course, she could have sat down and shut up, or even apologised. But no, she had to take her daughter off the bus and bollocks up both their days. This one's from Pinoy Silver. Screaming brat doesn't get what he wants. Just a quick story of a time I was petty enough to spend money to deny a spoiled brat a cool toy. A few years ago, while working overseas for the military, I was doing some quick shopping at my base exchange. While standing in an aisle looking at some cleaning items, I began to hear in the distance the sound of what felt like a screaming bat-goat hybrid that just proceeded to get louder and louder. I looked out of the aisle to see the possible cryptid, but just saw a screaming little boy being pushed in a shopping cart by his mum. People around them were looking annoyed, as the kid was practically screeching at the top of his lungs over and over again.
I want it! I want the big gun! I want the big gun!
And pointing at the toy aisle a few rows down. While passing by me, I overheard the mum telling her son, "Not now, sweetie. Mummy has to get to the makeup counter. We'll pick it up on the way out." This rubbed me the wrong way. Not only was this mother okay with how her son was acting, but she was also going to reward him. I then got curious and decided to go to the toy aisle to see this big gun. I turned the corner and immediately saw what he was talking about. And I'll give the kid credit, he has good taste, because on the shelf was the biggest Nerf gun I had ever seen. It was called the Titan CS50, and it was just a straight up minigun. For example, see the heavy weapons guy from Team Fortress. After spending a few minutes admiring it and daydreaming about how I would have absolutely destroyed my friends in the Nerf gun fights we had as kids with this monster, I then realised this Nerf gun was the last on the shelf. I immediately grabbed it and then found a store employee to ask a few questions. "Excuse me, can I ask a few questions about this toy?" "Yes, sir, what would you like to know?" "Is this the last one you have? Is there any more in the back?" "Let me check." The employee then leaves to the back of the store for a few minutes, and then returns to tell me the best news possible. "Hey sir, yeah, that one you're holding is the last one of the toy that we have. I also checked on our computer, and there doesn't seem to be any more in stock in our other closest exchange store or our online store. So if you want to get it, better get it now, because I don't think we're going to be getting any more anytime soon." Me, smiling like the Grinch when he got a wonderful, awful idea. "Thank you." I immediately proceeded straight to the checkout and bought the Nerf Youngling Slayer 2000. But the cherry on top was what happened after I bought my new toy. I went back into the store to make sure that the mini Banshee knew what I'd just bought. I found him still in the shopping cart next to the makeup counter with his mum talking to a salesperson. I casually walked by in front of the kid with the Nerf BFG under my arm, and what happened next was most definitely worth the price tag. The look of shock and fear just completely took over this kid's face as he starts to scream as well as yank on his mum's sleeve and point at me. I just disappear into another aisle and proclaim that my job was now done. While leaving the store, they must have rushed back into the toy aisle because I again could hear the ear-piercing screeches of that little crotch goblin coming from the toy aisle, screaming, "It's gone! It's gone! Ah!" I usually don't like the sound of screaming kids, but that might as well have been a live Aerosmith performance because that was just pure audible chocolate to me. And while leaving, I walked past a guy entering the store who could also hear the screaming kid. He said, "Jesus Christ, what the hell is that?" And I replied, "Most likely a mistake." I don't have a lot to say about this one, other than to highlight the fact that this guy's behaviour is petty, vindictive, and pretty horrible. And funny as all fuck. Well done, mate. This one's from OK Interview 1739. An entitled mother rips open the doors on my ambulance, and it doesn't end well for her. So, this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30-year-old male paramedic, and I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbour's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. She was awake and breathing, and we started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? Etc. She stated she had a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the sides of her head and a big bruise is starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she's on any blood thinners. She said she was, for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain and she should go and get some scans done. She agrees and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like, a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbour whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologised that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbour then noticed our patient was her neighbour, and that's when she started yelling something totally different. You can't take her to the hospital. I've got errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids. My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency, and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbour let out a loud huff, and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open, and who do I see? The entitled neighbour, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her. What the hell do you think you're doing? She yells back. I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow. She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell and I might be having a stroke. The entitled neighbour yells back at her and says, You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke. My partner then hears a commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbour was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbour stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbour will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbour never even gives her a heads up about these things. Small update. My contact at the hospital said the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There's no update on the neighbour. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift day. Update. Hey everyone, sorry for the late update. Unfortunately, it's not as exciting as some of you would hope for. So I got in touch with the officer on that call, and he said that the woman was not formally charged with anything. The patient is back home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file for an order of protection from the neighbour, but I don't believe I will ever be privy to that information unless something happens again. I read a majority of the comments, and most people are saying to contact elder abuse and DCFS. The only problem with filing those reports is having concrete proof. We never actually saw any children, so we can't really say if they were abused or neglected at all. We can say that we have a suspicion, but for all we know, they could be living their best lives at home with the entitled parent. If the entitled parent had left and abandoned her kids, then that's another story. Calling DCFS without any signs of child abuse and just working off hearsay can just cause more problems if the accusations are unfounded. The same can pretty much be applied about the elder abuse. We have no actual proof of elder abuse occurring. The entitled neighbour was not involved in the actual fall, and there was no suspicion for any kind of financial, physical, emotional, or social abuse. The way our patient talked about the kids getting dumped on her was in a more inconsiderate way and not an abusive way. Long story short, the entitled neighbour was just kind of a butthole. I am, however, hoping that the patient presses charges for assault, but I don't know if she will. If I hear anything more, I'll post another update.
So, I mean, what? And I cannot stress this enough. The fuck? The level of batshittery here is truly awe-inspiring, but that's nothing compared to the selflessness on display. Picture the scene. You're a crazy lady who's generously unleashed her DNA on the world in the form of 3 young children. You see your elderly neighbour being carted off in an ambulance in the middle of the night. Your first thought is not for the well-being of said neighbour, but rather you bravely think of yourself and the vital errands you're supposed to run tomorrow. This is followed swiftly by the time you've thoughtfully planned for your kids to spend in the company of someone who isn't a total cretin. So incensed by that deprivation, you yank open the ambulance door so you can heal your neighbour with the astounding power of your stupidity, only to be outwitted by a locking mechanism. Upon learning she may be having a stroke, you launch yourself at the nearest law enforcement officer so you can get tased and arrested, thus allowing your children to benefit from your potentially extended absence. Not all heroes wear capes, my friends.
We've come to the end of the video.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Perhaps you can go door to door, handing out leaflets for a lost cat that never existed. That'd be fun. Remember to click the little bell icon and share this video with your friends. And remember, most importantly, we know nothing. We don't even know if this is just a simulation. For sure, none of it matters in the grand scheme of things. Stay chirpy. See you next time.